Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special crossover episode of Whether or Not. We're your co-hosts. I'm Christopher Tate.
And I'm Allison Gutleber.
So coming up on tonight's show, some of our friends from Up in the Air will be joining us on the show tonight to bring some nature in the news stories. Zach Petty is here with a story on the San Francisco drought, and Logan Williams is here remembering one of NASA's hidden figures.
We also have Matt Yarosewick here to talk about winter jet stream patterns and why Pennsylvania is having such a mild winter. And also, we have Ryan DePhillips going to give us a little bit of an up-in-the-air version of our extended forecast.
But first, here's an extended edition of Nature in the News.
The state of California is having some precipitation-induced problems, or should I say, lack thereof. The rainy season for San Francisco and Central California is typically from December through February. This past February was the driest and first rain-free month since 1864. And just to put this into perspective, in 1864, the Civil War was going on. City and state officials are bracing for the possibility of an intense and early wildfire season. Although many areas in the state are slated in a drought monitor notice, the state is handled to prepare for single-year droughts. They have access water in storage and reservoirs that can be used if the conditions become desperate from higher precipitation years. Over the past 20 years, the month of February brought an average of 3.5 inches of rainfall at the San Francisco airport. Residents are taking notice of the issue and are bracing to handle another blazing wildfire season. Daniel Swain, a climate scientist from UCLA, sums it up perfectly. A miracle March wouldn't dig us all the way out of the hole, but it could help.
A small nation in Central Africa is getting creative when it comes to electricity production. The country of Rwanda, known for its violent past, is trying to shift itself forward and into the 21st century. One way they are trying to do that is through the Kivuwatt Project. The Kivuwatt Project is located along Rwanda's border on Lake Kivu. Along the lake floor, it's estimated that the water contains nearly 300 billion cubic meters of carbon dioxide and 60 billion cubic meters of methane. Barges along the lake's surface with pipes extending deep into the lake collect the gas filled with water, they siphon out the gases, and then they release the water back into the lake. The gases are then sent to a power plant along the shore where they are used to produce electricity for surrounding areas. Officials say that this project is meant to both stabilize the lake and to increase the public access to electricity, a commodity that only around 50% of Rwandans have at this moment. By 2024, the Rwandan government hopes that by expanding this project, electricity will be extended to 100% of their citizens.
Have you ever noticed TV meteorologists or the National Weather Service talk about lower than average snow in meteorological winter or an unseasonably warm meteorological spring? Well, if not, there is a distinction between astronomical and meteorological seasons. These are based on the position of Earth in relation to the Sun, whereas the meteorological seasons are based on the annual temperature cycle. The rotation of Earth around the Sun forms the basis for the astronomical calendar, in which we define seasons with 2 solstices and 2 equinoxes. The elliptical shape of Earth's orbit around the Sun causes the lengths of the astronomical seasons to vary between 89 and 93 days. These variations in season length would make it very difficult to consistently compare statistics for a particular season from one year to the next. Meteorologists and climatologists break the seasons down into groupings of 3 months based on the annual temperature cycle as well as calendar months. Meteorological winter includes December, January, February. Meteorological spring includes March, April, May. Summer includes June, July, and August. And September, October, and November reside in meteorological fall. By following the civil calendar and having less variation in season length, it becomes easier to understand seasonal statistics from the monthly statistics, both of which are very useful for agriculture and commerce needs. And just a fun fact, we crossed from meteorological winter into meteorological spring on Sunday, March 1st, 2020.
In the early hours of March 2nd, a devastating tornado tore through downtown Nashville, Tennessee, leaving some 24 people dead and dozens more injured. Thousands of homes and businesses were destroyed by a storm that struck at a particularly dangerous time, nighttime. The National Weather Service has preliminarily concluded that the damage caused by the twister was consistent with EF3 damage. But Nashville was not the only region hit by this tornadic storm, however. Here's how the radar in Nashville looked that night. As we begin our radar loop shortly after sunset, you can see storms already begin to bubble up in far western Tennessee. In the wee hours of the morning, we watched this particular cell right here approach Nashville, strengthen, and form a tornado. You can see the telltale hook symbol on this radar, which is one of the biggest indications that a tornado is likely forming, or in this case, is already on the ground. Now this cell tracked to the east, maintaining its strength, and its tornado even strengthening to an EF4 by the time it reached the communities of Cokeville and Monterey. Now eventually, the band of storms weakened and moved further east as it headed toward the Appalachians. There is some good news though. Some iconic landmarks in the city, like the I Believe in Nashville mural, were completely untouched. And we are hearing more and more stories of survival and heroism by rescuers across Tennessee who are continuing to help in the recovery efforts in Music City, USA.
Last week, evacuations occurred in Norco, California due to a wildfire. The fire broke out in windy conditions with gusts up to 25 miles per hour and burned 175 acres, forcing several hundreds to evacuate their homes. This wind-driven fire caused minor damage to 5 households and affected 15,000 lives. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the people affected.
Hello everyone, I'm student meteorologist Ryan Phillips. Typically I'm on Up in the Air, but now I'm for Weather or Not, filling in for the extended forecast. And the extended forecast for most of this winter season has been pretty balmy, but for most of the precipitation outlook for most of the lower 48, looks like it's going to be wetter than average, except for Montana and into northern portions of Wyoming. From Billings to the reservation areas and into Casper, Wyoming, higher chances of below normal precipitation. Elsewhere, we got influx of moisture from the Pacific Ocean really extending its way into Death Valley, Arizona, Nevada, into central California where there has been some drought. Also into the Four Corners, so there could be some relief in the drought. Stay tuned for that. And a lot of that moisture really spreads into the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, into our neck of the woods. And since there's going to be higher than normal temperatures expected for this time period, expect most of this to be rain. And we could really see that from most of the lower 48. Looks very warm, except the Pacific Northwest, higher chances of below normal temperatures along the coastal regions of Northern California to Oregon and into Washington in the Olympus Mountains, as well as the city of Seattle. But further south into the frontier range of the Rockies, into Denver, and also spreading east into the Ohio River Valley, higher chances of above normal temperatures, and that really spreads its way further east into the mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and New England areas. And that's thanks to ridging, which basically means there's a high pressure off the Atlantic Ocean, bringing counterclockwise flow into our region. South to north, that's why we have some warmer temperatures, and that's been the trend for a lot of this winter. In terms of drought, most of the drought is really spotty into the southeast, but it's really more prolonged and sustainable into the west. And the only change we really have that's noticeable is some severe drought sprouting out in Idaho, and a little bit more moderate drought along the Cascade Range of Seattle and Oregon. And into the Four Corners, there's been consistent drought, as well as Central California, which has been pretty persistent, but again, there could be some relief. And heading further south into Texas, there was about 12 million people impacted by drought. That has now dropped to 5 million, and with more precipitation in the forecast, more people will actually see some relief. While we are in a snow drought, there's no drought in terms of precipitation in sight. So we're going to take a quick break, but stay tuned for Weather or Not.
I'm Matt Yarosewick, and today we're going to be talking about the winter jet stream pattern. We've seen milder conditions across the state for much of the winter, and we're in a snow deficit, and we'll see those numbers in just a moment. But we're going to be looking at the winter jet stream pattern, and I have a jet stream here, and this is not the pattern that we have seen so far for much of this winter. This pattern has tried to set up a few times, but has overall been kicked out from our new pattern here, which we're actually going to be taking a look at in just a moment. Chillier conditions with this pattern with a trough here across the eastern U.S. And as we put a storm system down to the south here on our boundary and we move this storm to the northeast, you'll see that much of the state of Pennsylvania covered in that snow, and this is the kind of setup which would warrant for heavier snow totals and really more snow overall across much of the season here across the Commonwealth. Now, that really has not been the case. So as that storm gets out of here, we're going to have our jet stream kind of move into the pattern where we've been stuck in so far this winter season. Now, as you'll see, our jet stream is off to the west. That will warrant a pattern which will bring in our milder and warmer air from the south and the east off of the Gulf of Mexico, and this will bring in more rain as well, rather than that snow. Chillier temperatures will be up towards the Great Lakes and back into the Rockies, and that is where most of the snow has fallen this winter season. So as we put a storm here down to our south yet again, we're going to see where this storm goes as it moves to the north and the east. And as you'll see here in Pennsylvania, this storm system is to our north and the west. Now this storm system may start off as some sort of snow or mixed precipitation across the state, which is what we've seen mainly for about the entire winter season here across much of the state, but then quickly change over to rain. Meanwhile, snow confined up into the Great Lakes and the upper Midwest. That has been the predominant pattern throughout the winter season. And as we zoom in here to State College and the surrounding areas, across eastern PA is where we're going to start. Philadelphia. Looking at them, they've seen a measly 0.3 inches, their observed snowfall there in pink, and 20.6 inches is their average snowfall to date. So if you look at those numbers, they're about 20 inches below average for their snowfall to the season. Up in Wilkes-Barre, they've seen 21.7 inches, but they are still about 16 inches below that average. And the same thing in Harrisburg, about 16 inches below that average snowfall, but sitting at 5.1 there for a total. As we move to the west, State College, we have seen over a foot of here in State College, but that has not happened all at once. It's been little events spread out through the season. So 12.1 our total there. 38.6 is actually our average, so we're well below that as well. Over into Pittsburgh, 20.6. They're still about 16 inches below that average. And up in Erie, you may be thinking, wow, 90 inches is a lot of snow. But up there in the northwest, they're dealing with lake effect snow as well. So those totals will be really higher. And especially, we've still seen those cold air masses move in. And Erie still seeing 66.3 inches, but that is still about 24 inches below their average. So mainly across the Commonwealth, we've been dealing with that snow deficit. And that jet stream pattern is really to blame for this snow deficit across the state. Allison, Chris, back to you.
Thanks, Matt. That's just about all the time we have for this episode, but before we let you go, we have our whiz quiz question. Which is the latest day in the cold season where the record minimum temperature in State College is less than 0 degrees? A, March 1st, B, March 9th, C, March 18th, or D, March 26th? And the correct answer is C, March 18th.
So on that March 18th, about 50 years ago, the temperature, Allison, fell all the way to -9 here in State College, not only making it the latest day with a record minimum below 0, but also the coldest day on record in State College. Thankfully, in Ryan's extended forecast, we saw that none of that is expected over the next week or so.
Yeah, so we saw in the extended forecast we're going to have some spring-like temperatures, and last week we did just enter the meteorological spring season, so it's going to be very exciting to see those spring temperatures.
And much as I'm a fan of snow and winter weather, it is going to be kind of nice to be cruising around campus in shorts and a t-shirt once again. That is all the time we have on this week's special episode of Weather or Not. Of course, we'd like to thank our friends at Up in the Air, Logan Williams, Zach Petty, and Ryan DePhillips for their contributions to this week's episode.
And our very own Matt Yarosewick.
And from all of us at Weather or Not and Up in the Air, we're your co-hosts, Christopher Tate.
And I'm Allison Gutleber.
Have a great night, everybody.